Well, welcome everybody. Really nice to see you all. Lee Mason and I, a while back, decided to put together, people from the integral world in general who have published papers, books, who have created communities, conferences, gatherings, courses. We've been trying to compile them into one place. And if you go to the Practical Integral website, you'll see that there's a page called Integral Resources. And under Integral Resources, we have books and publications, academic papers, courses, and community gatherings. Um, at the moment, they're a little bit more Wilberian Integral is where we started, but we're going to keep adding to these lists. There's already a lot, but it's so much to do that Lee and I both haven't had the time to get into everybody just yet. But we're slowly adding things as we go along. When it comes to community gatherings, this is where we find our special guest today, and that's some of the special kind of the key crew members of Integral Africa Conference. And I guess we could also just call it Integral Africa. That's where we thought it'll be just absolutely wonderful to meet with Ruan and Thando as some of the key organizers of the Integral African Conference and the Integral African Project. You can also check the Integral African Conference website, of course, and the next IAC is in 2026. And I'll be honest that certainly the European audience in the Integral space is probably more connected to the Integral African Conference than the US-centric Integral space. I think I certainly kind of come from the US-centric Integral spaces, and regrettably, we haven't really spoken much about the Integral African Conference and its project, not as much as we should. So perhaps this is a stepping stone into that. 2026, we should all keep that in mind. Meanwhile, welcome Ruan and Thando. Just really lovely to meet you both. I'll just very quickly maybe try to summarize a little bit about what Integral Africa is doing as far as we understand. So maybe speaking to the conference, it is an initiative aimed at integrating African indigenous knowledge systems with contemporary integral theory. It seeks to create a platform for dialogue, learning, and co-creation among African and global thought leaders. The conference emphasizes inclusivity, cultural relevance, and the application of integral frameworks to address African challenges and opportunities. So with that, I think the first thing I would have you maybe both do, and perhaps briefly, because I think we'll hear from you both a lot as we go along. I'd like to invite you, Ruan and Thando, to introduce yourselves just briefly. Where did you grow up? Where do you live now? And how did you get into Integral?
Okay, I will start. Hello everyone. My name is Ruan Viljoen. I am actually Rika's son, and therefore I am third generation spiral dynamics. I'm a third generation spiral dynamics. Some people say wizard, but I don't really love that word. But I'm third generation, and I studied underneath Dr. Don Beck, as well as my mother, Rika Viljoen, and Dr. Lorraine Laubscher, who worked with Dr. Don Beck on all his visits to South Africa in some of his most prominent life work. So I am from South Africa, was born and bred in South Africa, was born in a town called Durban. It's a coastal town or city, rather. Then moved to Bloemfontein, where I grew up, and I went to high school and university in Gauteng, so in between Johannesburg and Pretoria. Where after I went to business school and find myself in the family business called Mandala Consulting. It's a management consulting firm or organizational development OD house. I see myself primarily as a facilitator or a group process facilitator. I like to work with people, I like to work with groups. And I have found myself using spiral dynamics and integral theory quite often in various spaces within my developmental work. I have played a key role in the Integral African Conference and the organizing of the Integral African Conference, the first one in 2019, as well as the second one last year. And yeah, I'm excited to be here with everyone today and to hear what questions there are. And I give over to you, Tando.
Thanks, Ron. So hello everybody. My name is Tando Ikaneng. I am from a very small town, also very coastal, like Roan, called Howick. I wasn't born here, but I did spend a huge, or I guess a big number of my teen years here. So I consider myself Howick a Howick person. But yeah, so I was introduced to Spiral and introduced to Integral 2 years ago. I think it was 2023. So I'm very young in the space. But I think that has worked to my advantage because I've just been able to soak up all this different knowledge and all these different insights from various different people through this experience. So yes, and then the role that I played in the Integral African Conference was that I like to call myself the primary administrator. I don't know if everybody else would call me that, but I was very much involved in communication, administration. I was also just basically front of house, so I got to meet a lot of different people and just be involved in a different way. So yes, that's me.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Thanks both for the introduction. And one of the things Namali and I were curious about is for each of you personally, what's the relationship between your integral theory part of your personality, so to speak, and African culture? So how do you experience the relationship between those two facets?
Okay, I can try and give it a go. I'm not too sure if it's going to be of value, but I think so. African culture is very deeply, it's very deeply rooted in what I understand is the purple value system within Spiral Dynamics. It is very soulful. It's very traditional. Tanu, maybe you can also add value here if you'd like, coming from your own space and your own experience. It's very collective. So we see it play out in Africa quite a lot, especially South Africa in our own experience. But yeah, can you just repeat the question? Was it for us specifically, or how does our own
Yeah.
personality resonate with? I
Yeah,
just want to make sure I understand.
so the reason we came upon this question is we were reflecting on how for each of us we're embedded in a particular culture and a particular society. So when we are exposed to integral theory, it tends to integrate with, let's say, a worldview that we already have based on a society and culture that we're embedded in. And so the whole idea of an integral African conference and then an integral European conference is that there's a felt sense apparently of different world spaces. So we'd like to sort of get the sense of how is that for you personally? How do you feel that different space, so to speak?
Okay.
Let me also add a little bit to that, because I think the question that I was going to ask next is somewhat related somehow. There are African philosophies like Ubuntu, other indigenous philosophies, spiritualities, relational dynamics that are unique to Africa. And so when you Thando and Ruan and Rika, when she's able to join, also when each of you, I'm sure, had that in some ways first. Maybe that was more primordial even to you. And then comes these, as we grow, we get introduced to these ideas. And so I think Lee and I were curious about how that unique Africanness influences what you then come in to learn as an adult, these new ideas from other cultures, and specifically this relationship between integral and I'll just say Africanness for now, that flavor, the taste of that. How is that for you as an individual personally? What does that mean?
I think maybe Ron, I can say something a little bit here. Obviously, being a very African woman, I come from a very African household as well, with also very traditional kind of values. And I think as I've grown and as I've also been just exposed to integral and just integral theory in general, I've come to understand and see different myself almost in other people as well. So I think with us being a very African community, as much as we are very tight knit and we can, you know, I don't want to say we're excluding others, but you know, when you're with your people, you're with your people. And I think through integral and just integral theory and engaging with others, just on various topics, you just get to see that, you know, it's as much as we have different worldviews, but we still can find similarities and we can still find areas in which we can agree. And I think for me, that was one of the biggest things because for many people, there is conflict and differences. And, you know, there's, you know, different thoughts, different ideas, different values as well. But I think through integral theory, or personally for me, as you know, I've been brought into this, as I said, I'm very young, but it's just opened my eyes to kind of just understanding things from different perspectives and realizing that, you know what, as much as, you know, I've been kind of enabled to think a certain way because of my surroundings, through interactions with other people, I've kind of like understood things from different perspectives. I don't know if that makes sense. So I think for me, with that being African and being, you know, very communal and being very close knit and being, you know, very dependent on one another, I've been able to also just branch out and see, you know, that certain things can happen beyond my immediate surroundings or like um certain ideas and certain actions and certain behaviors still do occur even if it's outside of my what I'm used to. So I can see myself in other people and see, you know, so as much as that doesn't necessarily speak to African philosophies, but I think one of the biggest things about Ubuntu, as you mentioned, normally, is that you are able to see the other person as a person. You know, that's what Ubuntu is all about, recognizing the human nature within each other. And I think one thing about being in spaces where, you know, it's just either African voices or other people's voices, or just voices that you're used to hearing all the time, you're kind of protected or your mindset is kind of like enclosed. And yeah, so I think for me, in terms of my how I have kind of grown into it or how I found myself fitting in is that, you know, you can always find someone or something in another person, that can get you connected in a way. So yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And perhaps in a minute we can take it into perhaps elucidate more what African philosophy can mean, either without or within an integral context. But Ruan, I wanted to also invite you to perhaps speak to the previous.
Okay, yeah, I think for me personally, yeah, I've been exposed to spiral dynamics quite a few years ago. I even do training in spiral dynamics. So just applying that theory into our context has been such a big eye-opening experience for me. I think it's something that continuously, like Tanu says, expands my mind, it expands my own perspective. It's something that I think it's almost like very related to that whole idea of uh, we will never be fully healed or fully educated. There's always a room for improvement and development. And I think it's amazing that there's people that want to have conversations like this and want to see how we can integrate even the you know the big role players within integral as well as spiral dynamics, because at the end of the day, everything is integral, everything is together, you know. Everything adds value, everything brings purpose, and yeah, it's like a puzzle piece to the larger picture of integral. I think there's different for me, or there's different schools and different thought leaders in these spaces, but at the end of the day, we have so much value to gain from all of them. And I think the purpose of one big purpose of the African Integral Conference was to, to do human better. I remember that was one of Rika's biggest slogans, you know, to try and how can we all do human better was the question. And I for sure believe that that is inclusion, including all of the different role players. So for me, that's the thing that I marinate on quite often. I try to personally see where I can gain more insight and better perspective from both angles. Yeah, so I think that's all I have to say for now, but yeah, let's see how it goes.
Yeah, thanks, Ruan. And I think we're dealing with a polarity of, let's say, surface details and underlying similarities, so that we're basically, at least from the broadest possible integral perspective, we're all expressions of an underlying, let's say, ground of being, but we're all manifested in specific ways and embedded in particular societies and cultures. And I think it's nice to be able to include all of those surface differences, so to speak, from a sense of the underlying interconnectivity. And that's at least what I'm hearing you both speak to. So thanks for that.
I guess maybe if there's something to add to this, I'm curious also whether there's something reciprocal between the culture that you grew up in and you were born into and have been a part of. Is there something that you find that the African perspective enriches integral or spiral dynamics or these developmental kind of ideas? And also, do those developmental ideas also then enrich some of the African ideas that you've grown up with? Like, is there a way in which that you have found that if I hold on to just one of them, perhaps it isn't enough? It's another polarity in some ways. How do they each support, enrich each other? How do they each make each other better?
Normally with your question, I think it just brings me to, or it just connects. But like my immediate thoughts is in terms of spirituality, or you can say, that a lot of our African philosophy and a lot of our values and culture is based on spirituality. And I think with that, you always kind of have to, with specifically my culture, you always kind of have to think back and, kind of see where you've been, right, in order to not repeat the mistakes of the past. So I think if anything, that African philosophy or spirituality actually gets right, it's the fact that we are always kind of looking back to, okay, what have people before us done? How have they done it? How can we apply it to what we're doing now? And we also always give thanks because we know that, okay, we wouldn't have come here or we wouldn't have come this far if it wasn't for sacrifices made by people before us, and it can be even the smallest thing, the smallest seed planted outside that has now grown into this beautiful tree, that gives us shade. I think if anything, that would probably be the best metaphor because, something small that one person did can now either feed many generations afterwards or provide shade for many generations afterwards. So I think if anything, that's what our culture is really rooted in, is that spirituality and understanding that, okay, we have connections. We didn't just come here alone. We have connections with people that have lived before us, that live with us. We're connected through the people that have lived before us as well. And I think if anything, that feeds into kind of I'm also kind of in the psychoanalytical space. So I think maybe a lot of my interpretations can also be quite psychoanalytical or systems dynamics. But I think if anything, it just feeds into the whole thing that I think a lot of people are also kind of realizing now that, connections are important and being able to, connect with people before us and people around us. And I think that's something that, Africans also do quite well. And that I think has been kind of slowly but surely dispersing or going to like other continents and different areas and regions where we have taught, or that we have embodied that the importance in, being grounded but also being connected to one another.
Yeah, beautifully said, Tana. It's almost like that I am because you are, I am because you were kind of mentality. And that's a very strong, strong value that we have as Africans, I believe. Yeah, beautifully said.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, so one of the things Namali and I were speaking about is also different types of politics in different regions of the world. Because Tando, what you were just speaking to, it sounds like, at least in many Western democracies, it's with increasing reflections on the past and on past injustices that one of the things many communities feel is difficult to do is to honor lineages and to be appreciative of people that have come before, because nobody's perfect, of course, and all previous generations, if you critically examine them, have perpetrated all sorts of injustices, and so we were wondering whether there are also differences politically in how, for instance, we're seeing a lot of tensions and unrest in modern Western democracies, and uh, whether you're seeing similar patterns or different patterns in other areas on the African continent. Is that anything that you can speak to?
And I would also maybe add to that, is it's like living in the US and kind of watching the current political dynamics here, but also watching the European dynamics. The pendulum swings. I think the pendulum is swinging from sort of left to right, and right now, currently, maybe there's a swing to the right, and in some ways, I think it kind of makes sense also because it had swung so left in many ways. I guess I'm curious. I guess what Lee and I are both asking is, are you seeing such, what are the political sort of cultural, socio-cultural political dynamics that you're seeing in Africa? And how do your own work with spiral dynamics or developmental ideas? Oh, did we just lose Ruan? Like maybe we just lost Ruan. Well, we can have,
We might have. I'm sure he'll join
yeah, I'm sure
when
he'll
he
come back.
can.
Yeah. And
Yeah, hopefully. I hope he's okay.
that's okay. I think he'll join us. But we'll start with you, Thando. It's very easy for some of us in the West when we know these developmental ideas, to assess those ideas through those dynamics, especially these socio-cultural, socio-political, cultural dynamics through these developmental ideas. I'm curious if there are those interesting, sometimes perhaps even intense dynamics going on similarly in Africa as well, and how do you use these ideas from integral and spiral dynamics and other ideas to look at those dynamics?
This is actually quite a loaded question. Um, very quite loaded. But I think it's very important to actually address it. Because I think honestly it's everywhere. I'm not that well traveled. I've only been in South Africa, but even within here, just being able to observe from where I'm sitting, or as much as we also have our issues within the country, you're able to recognize that maybe other people also have it quite bad. For example, so currently, or just in general, so currently we're going through an intense, and it's been quite a few years now, I think since maybe 2017, we're currently going through an intense femicide in our country. And a lot of people, um, it's complicated in the sense that it can be very rooted in culture as well. So African culture, it really does prioritize, it's a lot of people say it's patriarchal in terms of power dynamics, but matriarchal in terms of, how things are run. And I think that's where the beauty and kind of the hurt comes in, because men really do quite often, hold a lot of the power. So yes, Sweden, I see femicide. So a lot of women in our country are being killed, being raped. I think the latest stat is that 3 women are killed or raped every minutes at this point, I think, in the country. And it's a loud cry from everyone. Every few weeks we have, and it's women and children as well, mostly women and children. So it's quite a sore for us. But a lot of the time it is at the hands of men. So I think when looking at that and the power dynamics within relationships and even within broader society, where a lot of men actually have, the power or have or are protected, I almost want to say, by their role in society, it kind of hurts the other, which is us, us as women. So I think when you're looking at things like that, and then you also see other countries at war, physical wars and out there, and you're kind of like, oh yeah, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on all over the world, and you can see that, okay, there's a lot of tension and there's a lot of friction even within the African continent. And those voices, like the African voices, are not the ones that are really elevated, I almost want to say. So African experiences are quite often left out of very important conversations. It's only now really that, we're starting to be more included in things like that. And we're getting a little bit more of attention in terms of what we're going through. But I think in terms of what we're seeing in terms of where Integral would actually come in. I think one thing about Integral is that it's very accepting of anything. As Ron said before he left, is that it's inclusive and it's accepting of everything and as it comes, and understanding things from and how everything kind of fits together. And I feel, having Integral even being in conversations just would lead to better understanding of what exactly is going on with the other. And instead of more of an us and them, it's more of like, let's understand what we both have to offer in this space and then, use it accordingly. I think if anything, that's what is needed, is that we need to actually get to a point where we understand our roles and what we have to offer, and not necessarily our roles that are frigid and like, we can't move beyond this, but understand that this is what we have to offer and nothing can really, we shouldn't try to be forcing each other to do, what it is that we're not wanting to do, I think. So when we're looking at all the crime and all the friction and everything that's actually happening, as you said, things are kind of sort of swinging where, okay, fine, we're okay for some time, and then everything just goes really bad after some time as well. And it almost feels like there's no end in sight. But I think, with time and I feel like all these things kind of happen also in cycles. So it's like, okay, fine, this whole thing will happen and then everything will quiet down and then there'll be a massive buildup of, more tension with time. So I think we're just at a point where, everything's kind of blowing up in order for it to be rebuilt again. And in order for things to actually have meaningful or be meaningful, change to actually be meaningful. So I think yeah, we're at a very weird time where, and everything is kind of like in everybody's faces. I think with social media and like the TVs and, the news, everybody can see every single hurt that everybody else is going through. And I think that's also what's, I don't want to say is making the process of the transitions or whatever faster, but it's just making people more aware that, there are other people in the world and there are other people who live completely different lives to us but go through similar experiences, even if it's not exactly similar. But at the end of the day, oppression is the same. You can feel oppression similarly, whether you're here in Africa or you're somebody in the US who's, going through, the Trump administration and you're a minority in the space. Oppression is still oppression, doesn't matter your context. So I think if anything, we're able to also just kind of see that, okay, it's kind of everywhere. And that's how the mass changes occur. And that's how people get to understand and empathize and see each other beyond what they've known.
Yeah, thanks, Tando. And before we open it up to the audience who might have some questions for you and perhaps for Ruan if he manages to rejoin, when Namali and I were researching all three of you, we noticed that you were involved in a project called Girls for Girls. And can you perhaps say something about that?
Yes, so I was involved in Girls for Girls. I was the secretary for the alumni club. But yeah, so Girls for Girls is basically an organization, a nonprofit um, that teaches young girls. I believe it's from the age of 18 to 30, if I'm not mistaken, if they haven't changed the age range yet. But it teaches them leadership skills. So it's a cohort, I think it's 8 weeks now, but it's 8 weeks, and every week we have an online, or we had an online session because it was still COVID. We had an online session and we'd go through what it takes to actually be a leader, and build our leadership potential. Just simply because girls don't have that opportunity. It's not easy to come by. A lot of girls. I'm currently working as a management consultant for an organization that does a lot of government projects. And one thing that you really see when you go into the rural areas is that girls are quite often excluded, either because they have so much family responsibility at home, or there just isn't enough investment in things like their leadership, their education. So it was very important for me to kind of go into Girls for Girls and be able to play a role in, building the community within the cohorts and within the nonprofits. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. So yeah, inspiring work. And let's open it up to anyone who has any questions. So feel free to raise your thumb. You can do that digitally, so we can see that you have a question for Tando.
While someone raises their hand, I just want to acknowledge, I want to go back to that response that Tando you gave around, African struggles. And, the question was around how do you see some of that through integral lens? I wanted to acknowledge what I heard in some ways, which I think is also speaking to a gift of these developmental or integrative ideas. What I heard was that the struggles are there everywhere, with all over the world. The struggles are real, and they continue to, show up in as many, many different challenges. And I think Integral provides us a way to accept people where they are and to see them for who they are, and take multiple perspectives on perspectives, take meta perspectives. And that, as hard as it may seem, where even there is division and struggle and challenge, nobody is 100% wrong. That, everybody is only partially right. So I just wanted to acknowledge that how you responded was just really valuable and helpful to remember that the struggles are there, and to some degree, at least in just keeping the conversation going, is a gift of Integral, I think. So
yeah, definitely. I remember, it's just too bad I can't remember who actually said it, but I think it was within my first month of actually starting to organize and be involved in getting the conference together. I was watching a few videos because I was still very new to the space, and I wasn't sure, I need to get more information because people are going to be coming to me and asking me questions. So I really wanted to be knowledged up. And one of the first things, and one of the most lasting things that I'll ever remember, is that when you meet someone different, you can't always be trying to find what's wrong. Always look for where they're right, and you'll almost always find it. And I think we're at a place in life in general where people just expect you to also take sides. I think that's one of the biggest things when it comes to conflicts or world conflicts and just world peace in general. There's always, people think it's very black and white. And I think, if anything, you kind of have to look deeper, and Integral forces you to kind of look beyond what is being said, look beyond how you've been conditioned to feel about something, look beyond how you've been raised or taught to think. And I think that's probably the most difficult part for people to just grow out of that mentality of this is what I think and this is what I believe. And anyone who doesn't go along with that is wrong. So I think what you've just said there, and I'll always remember it because now it's just, it's how people are supposed to interact. At the end of the day, if someone doesn't agree with what you're saying, you can actually move away from the conversation. You don't have to fight. It doesn't have to be a battle of words. It doesn't have to be a war. It doesn't have to be, all these big things that end up escalating beyond control. It can be, oh, okay, that's interesting that you actually think that. And if everybody at the smallest level could think of that or think that way, then people in power and people with more control over systems and politics and governance, then I think we'd live in a much more peaceful environment and live better and be better human beings because we understand that, we all come from somewhere and we all understand things differently because we come from that somewhere. But yeah.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to know about who comes to your conference. Are they all South Africans, or are they from all over the place? Do you get many Europeans or Asians or?
So the first two conferences, I think because we were starting off, I would say we did not have that many people coming from outside of South Africa. I think maybe we had about 20%. We had a few people actually also stream in, so we were able to get them on Zoom and they could watch from the comforts of their homes. But I think that was also around maybe 15 a day. But I think Rika in her travels, because Rika also is very involved in the IEC and ICON as well, in her travels. I know that her one mission is always to get kind of like Africa to the world. And she did say that we have seen a little bit more of the global integral coming to, our IEC. And because we've only had two, that's all we can really only compare one to the other. But the point is to grow. I think the point is to expand our thinking and expand our voices to beyond and see how we can connect on different soil. And I think also that's one of I don't want to say the founding principles of the conference, but that's one of the values of the conference, that you come here and you are a part of the African culture. So I think you come and you experience Africa as it is, and then you can go back. So I think if anything, we're trying to get as many people to come and experience it rather than to stream into it, just because it provides a different experience. But yes.
Can I say something? I've been to both I've given keynotes in South African, and I've been visiting South Africa for 10 years. So I have some insight into, for instance, talking about South Africa as a whole seems to me a mistake, because really the South and the North, even genetically, there's more difference between that than between Europeans and South Africans, for instance. There's all kinds of things that we have to be careful about.
No, you're definitely right, Suzanne. I think you're definitely right. As I did say that I'm not very well traveled. I'm not very well traveled, so I can only speak really from where, what I've experienced and what I've seen from where I'm standing. And again, like my view is obviously, I don't want to say clouded, but I wear the glasses that I've been wearing my whole life, except for the times I've changed the lens. But no, I definitely agree, and I think it's also something that we're trying to get involved in. I know that when we do get keynotes and when we do get people to come in and speak, we're trying to get not only South Africans. It's just that a lot of the time it's the South Africans that are available and the South Africans that are around and that can afford to actually come to the conference itself. So I think if anything, as we grow, we are trying to diversify just the offering that we have, and become more African than just South African. It's one of the biggest issues that we're in conversations about right now, about the next one, that we need to actually broaden the people. But one thing about South Africa, I think, as well, is that it also very diverse. So a lot of people do come to South Africa for either refuge or just to get better lives, because it's one of the better countries economically, politically, in terms of unrest. So a lot of people from all over the continent do come to South Africa, and we get to meet all of them, or most of them, or a lot of them. let me not say all, but we get to meet a lot of them, and I think that also enriches the experience, because as much as we do believe that they are South African, they have different cultural roots, and then they can come with those roots from where they come from and come offer their insights. But no, I 110% agree with what you're saying. It's me speaking from my, I don't know if I should say privilege, because I haven't traveled that well, but it's me speaking from my own understanding and my own experiences.
I would just like to encourage people from America and Europe more to go there. But for one thing, it's financially actually beneficial. It's a third of what it costs here to do things in South Africa. If I could retire there, I would.
You can come live with me. Come stay by me.
Anyway, that's why I said something that really is important, that it gets broadened and that people feel encouraged. It's not the dark continent. There's still this European sense that, down there and dark and primitive and all of those negative words. When South Africa, as far as I can tell, is one of the most creative places I've ever been to. So I'm advocating for a broader South African or African conference.
So, Suzanne, Suzanne, since you have attended some of those conferences and as a developmentalist yourself, you have spoken a lot about the indigenous views and how we often get it wrong, especially in the developmental world. I'm curious in regards to Africa and as a developmentalist, whether you'd like to speak a little bit to the integral African experience as how you experienced it.
Well, I started with that question I've had all along, is why do we have separate streams where the sort of the clan, the spiral dynamics clan, or a group that is really tightly connected, why they're not part of the bigger integral scene? It's just a question. It has bothered me in the past, and I still have it. Why can't we have a conference where we have one integral stream? That's the curious thing about it. And otherwise, it's been a wonderful experience, really, each time.
Mm-hmm.
And
go ahead, Suzanne. Go ahead.
Well, I don't know whether you heard it, but my keynote was on a big difference between individual development and cultural or integral development, because Ken and Don Beck both assume that individual development recapitulates now I can't think. I just had this brain injury, so I'm a little bit handicapped. But that they're not the same. And it has been perpetuated. Now you can't even question it anymore. But they're not the same. Especially where most people make meaning, which is in the conventional stages. There is it goes from blue to orange or from amber to orange, where most people, when we test 10,000 people, are somewhere between the two.
Mhm.
There's no stage for that because of the colors that were chosen and all kinds of things. But that, to me, is something that should be addressed.
And I think you have done so, Suzanne, which I think is getting picked up by many. And you know, it has been given a color as umber, I think, and the skill-centric stage. So that's very important.
That is that just to not parallel the thing, not say they're identical. There are certainly great parallels overall from Gibbs's time and all along. Yes.
Yeah.
And also the Ubuntu part of the thing, that I am because you are and you are because I am. That is so different from our sense of the individual separate self. That from the Western, the weird perspective, that I think we could learn a lot from that. To not see ourselves as so separate. The whole developmental theories develop the separate self first, before you then perhaps can expand to be more inclusive.
I think that's where, at least for some of us, I think the integral map with the 4 quadrants is helpful, so that you don't have to always look at everything through developmental stages. Yes. But that there are these 4 quadrants as 4 perspectives or 4 ontological realities in some sense, where in the 4 quadrants are flat to some degree, and that's helpful. The individual and the collective, and the inner and the outer always tetra arising, and we cannot
interact.
Yeah,
you can't have one without the other.
Yes. And they cannot be reduced to another.
Yes.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. So Tando, let me ask you as head administrator, as you called yourself, because Mark asked about the attendance volume. So how many people attended? So perhaps you can speak to that.
My memory. I'm trying to think.
Like, is it around 50 people or?
Yeah, so I think on different days, because we did have 3 days. So on different days, it was different amounts or numbers of people. The first day, we were 40. Yes, I believe we were 40. The second day was quite high. We were about 55. The third day was also a Sunday, and the last day and a half day. So it was quite slow. I think we were at around 20, 25 attendees. Yeah, as far as I can remember. I remember there was another integral event afterwards. I don't know, Susan, if you were there, but it was after the conference, and I believe it was a workshop. I had to leave, so you were there. Yes, I had to leave, so I wasn't in attendance for that one. But I did see pictures, and it seemed like quite well, let me not make assumptions from pictures, but there were quite a few people who were still kind of around and still engaging. So yeah.
The first conference was at the Cradle of Humanity, and that's near Joburg, near Johannesburg, and that was bigger. Overall, seemed to be a bigger conference than the one that happened in South Africa, in Cape Town. No, where was it? It was not in Cape Town.
No, it was also
in Johannesburg. Yeah.
Yeah, it was also in Joburg, just not close to the Cradle. It was central. It was in Sandton, which is very city, close to everything. Yeah. So the Cradle, I really enjoyed the Cradle, because you kind of are within, the start or the beginning of humanity. Like, it starts and kind of ends there, and there's hardly any reception. So you really, like, connection to the outside world can be very limited, but you are really absorbed and, like, immersed into what is actually going on around you. And that hotel, I think there's a hotel called 26 Degrees South, and that's where, Nelson Mandela had the peace talks, and there's so much just significance in, such a small space. So yeah, no, I definitely have a bias towards the first one.
I don't know.
Oh,
It
sorry,
was
Susan.
beautiful when you arrived there, that there are docents that show you the place. And she said, "Welcome to home." And it made me cry.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
So yes, do go if you can.
Yeah.
That's a
You
great
want-
endorsement, Suzanne.
Yeah. I guess, other than going to Africa or attending the Integral African Conference, what do you wish for, Thando, as far as, the global community being a part of your project and being able to support you? What would you like? What do you wish you would have?
I think if anything, and it might be very, I don't know. Yeah, it is very wishful thinking. But I think I've seen it happen and it's the most amazing thing. I just like for people to take something out of, what we have to say, essentially. Or basically what we have to offer. And that doesn't even mean attending, or that doesn't even mean being with us. It's just my wish through the space is to, kind of see things from a different, or for other people to see things from a different lens. I think for the longest time, as we were saying earlier, that a lot of people think, African is kind of backwards, or Africa is backwards and it's dark. And, even when in terms of like our culture and our spirituality and all of that, it's very misunderstood. And I think for us, it's just, or for me personally, in terms of, kind of spreading the Africanness, it's just for people to take something from what we're giving and to appreciate it. And I'm not even saying, take it and make it something different to what it actually is. Even from some things as, as small as food. Obviously, every culture and every region has its own food that it eats. But African food, or let's say non-Western food, is quite often the butt of the joke. And I think, I'm always in my head, I'm always just like, if you could taste, sometimes it's just, just be open to seeing things and experiencing it the way that we experience it. And, take something from that rather than to, look at it from, surface level and not engage, but decide based on what you're experiencing, what you're seeing. I think so for me, I think it's just my wish is for people to take something that we've given and that we're showing and to appreciate it, in, whatever way that they appreciate it. As long as, it's appreciating it in the way that it's like in its natural form. I think in the way that it is, not trying to change it, not trying to, degrade it. I think just seeing it for what it is. And that can be anything. That can be teachings, that can be, something even as small as a dance, or what we wear, or just our mannerisms, our tendencies, our habits. Just somebody to, with this experience, just acknowledge, oh, okay, this is different, but it's nice. And, take it with them and yeah, learn something.
That's beautiful. The university that I went to here in Boulder, Colorado, the African drumming and the African dance classes were some of the best ever.
Always. Oh, definitely.
I mean, I came out when I took those sessions sweating buckets and just like bursting with so much joy. So there's a really lovely African drumming community here and an African dance community here. It's really wonderful. But of course, I hear you, Thando. I think it is too. It's something that I often think, especially, and I'm also, speaking as a person of color myself, and as an immigrant, as a woman in many ways, when something feels a little different, something that I often practice and want to encourage us all to practice is just simply linger a little longer.
Mm.
Don't be so quick to sort of move away, or just begin to notice that typically we tend to move away pretty quickly and not even realize that, because that which is more popular, more mainstream, more lighter, even, and even in kind of, I'm speaking sometimes in sense of lighter skin also, just visually is quicker to see. It stands out more than darker skin. So when you see darker skin, or notice that we may not linger there as long as we might with someone else. And so linger there a little longer and just observe that. Observe how you feel lingering with that a little longer. So I think the mystery of Africa seems to be largely hidden, largely unknown to the mainstream. And I can speak as an Asian myself, as a Sri Lankan also. Sri Lankans don't know anything about Africa very much, or different African regions, or the nuances. And, mostly they'll know about Desmond Tutu, and they'll know about Nelson Mandela, and, that's fine, but there's the richness of the region. And I think as an integral community, it provides us even more incentive and more opportunity for our own spiritual growth to linger a little longer and get to know.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's lovely.
Yeah, so we wanted to close with basically a question about practicality. So, Thando, do you know of any, let's say, practical or concrete outcomes of the Integral African Conference? For instance, have there been any initiatives that have been spawned by people who attended, or what has come out of it? Or perhaps for you personally, has anything emerged that has been the result of attending or organizing the conference?
Mostly it's just currently just a network / a community, but I do know that quite a few of us who were involved, actually, I think all except one person on the committee, on the current committee. So we're now planning what's called the World Peace Forum. So we're now having a World Peace Forum in South Africa, and the chairperson of the conference itself was inspired by the trip to South Africa. So now I feel that Integral is really going into, not that it wasn't there already, but now it's people from Integral are taking up space in the peace world as well. And, and I think if anything, that's definitely a step in the right direction. So now we're working towards the World Peace Forum in November. And that's going to be in South Africa as well. And from that, because South Africa is also hosting the G20, from that we'll be providing, I can't remember what it's called, but we'll be providing a document just on peace and the practical aspects of peace. And how to do peace practically and better and differently as well. So I think if anything, it's just inspired, the connections that we've built have inspired collaboration towards bigger initiatives. I mean, the Integral African Conference is tiny in comparison to the European or the one in North America, but it's now started something that is, actually become a movement more than anything else. So I think if anything, that's the most significant that I've seen happen. But yes, it's mostly currently just a network, but we're hoping that with the third one, we build momentum, or we build momentum towards it through building movements like we have with the World Peace Forum. I think if anything, I think it's so much more meaningful to have something that we're working towards rather than to be a network that doesn't have anything to show for it. So I think within the next few years, we're building, our connections are becoming more and more concrete so that we can also, change the world one small group at a time. But yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So Tando, thanks so much, and of course also thanks to Ruan, who
Yeah,
presumably dropped off due to technical difficulties. But
Yeah.
yeah, thanks so much for being here, and of course everyone, thanks for being here. So
yeah. I have a little reading, and to close our call. And interestingly, we had a previous call with we were exploring integral medicine and integral health and healing with one Dr. James Duffy, and at the end of his call, I read something from a Ken Wilber book. Today, in the times that we live in, I just entered into AI. Give me a short poem about Africa. And it kind of brought me a little tear, actually. So this is from AI, and I'm going to read that to close our call. And it's called Africa's Song. Sun-baked earth, where lions roar, and ancient rivers forever pour. Green heart beats, a hopeful plea, from savannah to shimmering sea. Though scars remain from ages past, a spirit strong, built to last. Africa, your vibrant soul makes all humanity whole. That's from AI.
Well done, AI.
Well done,
Yeah.
AI.
That's quite good. Thank
Beautiful.
you.
So, thank you, everyone. We wish you all the best, Thando, with your project with
Thank you.
Integral Africa, and our love and appreciation for everyone involved. Rika, Ruan, I'm sure we'll have another opportunity to meet at some point. And may our paths cross.
Oh, definitely. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Bye.
Thank you,
feel
Thando.
free to unmute
Thank you,
yourself.
Namali.
Thank you.
you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Bye.